I told him I'd make him lose control. I told him I'd make him forget he was in charge. Then I blocked him, deleted everything, and pretended it never happened. But the next morning, my boss walked past my desk, stopped, leaned down until I could smell his expensive cologne, and whispered, "Running away already, Cece?" My heart stopped. The air in my lungs turned to ice. I didn't look up, I couldn't. I just stared at the spreadsheet on my monitor, the numbers blurring into a messy gray haze. He shouldn't know that name. He shouldn't know that voice. But the way he said Cece wasn't the way a CEO speaks to a junior marketing assistant. It was the way MinJ spoke to me at 2 a.m. when the world was quiet and our inhibitions were low. To everyone else at Kang Global, he was Jae-Min, Korea's Coldest Bachelor. A man whose face was carved from marble and whose heart was rumored to be made of high-grade titanium. He was the type of boss who could fire you with a blink and not remember your name 5 minutes later. But to me, for the last 3 weeks, he had been the mysterious man behind a blank profile on Global Hearts. How did I get here? Honestly, it started with a bad day and a very impulsive download. Working for Jae-Min was like being a foot soldier in a war where the general doesn't even know you exist. I had been at the company for 6 months, and the only time he'd looked at me was when I accidentally tripped near the elevator. He didn't help me up, he just stepped around me like I was a piece of discarded office furniture. That night, I went home, threw my blazer on the floor, and opened the app. I needed to feel like a person, not a ghost in a corporate hallway. I set up my profile as Cece. I didn't post my office face. I didn't post the Cynthia Moore who wore sensible flats and pulled her hair into a tight, stressed-out bun. I posted about Cynthia who loved her curves, who knew how to work a camera, and who wasn't afraid to be bold. I uploaded a photo in my favorite sapphire blue bikini, the one that made my skin look like glowing mahogany. Within 10 minutes, I matched with MinJ. His profile was empty. No bio, no face, just a photo of a high-end watch and a location tag that matched my city. Normally, I'd swipe left. I hate faceless men. But there was something about the way he messaged first. "You look like trouble, Cece," he wrote. I laughed, kicking my legs up on my couch. "You have no idea." "And what about you, MinJ? You're hiding. Are you ugly or just married?" "Neither," he replied instantly. "Just someone who spends too much time being what people expect him to be. Online, I can just be me." "And who are you?" I asked. "A man who is very intrigued by a girl in a blue bikini who thinks she can handle me." We talked for hours that first night. It was easy. It was electric. He was dominant, sure, but he listened. He asked about my day, and I told him, without names, about my robotic CEO, who probably didn't have blood in his veins, just liquid gold and ego. "He sounds like a challenge," MinJ had texted. "He's a nightmare," I replied. If I ever got him alone, I'd tell him exactly what I think of his Coldest Bachelor title. It's probably a cover for the fact that he has the personality of a dry sponge. MinJ's response was simple: "I'd pay to see that." The next 2 weeks were a blur of a double life. By day, I was Cynthia Moore, the girl who stayed late to fix reports Jae-Min tore apart with a red pen. I watched him walk through the lobby, his presence commanding silence, his eyes never straying from the path ahead. He was terrifying. He was beautiful. He was the man who made me feel like I was failing at life. But by night, I was Cece. And MinJ was my addiction. He started getting bolder. He'd tell me how he wanted to see me dressed in something proper, just so he could be the one to ruin it. He'd tell me about the pressure of his life, the way he felt like everyone wanted a piece of him, but nobody actually wanted him. I felt for him. I started falling for a ghost. "Cynthia, are you even listening?" my supervisor, Sarah, snapped, hitting my desk with a folder. I jumped, nearly knocking over my coffee. "Sorry, yes. The cue for projections. The CEO wants them by 5. And he's in a mood today. Don't be the one to tip him over the edge," she warned. I spent the whole day buried in data, my eyes aching. Every time the elevator dinged, my heart did a nervous little dance, thinking it might be him. Jae-Min didn't usually come down to the junior floor, but today was different. He was doing a floor sweep. When he finally walked past my cubicle, he didn't stop. He didn't look. But I caught the scent, the same woody, expensive scent I'd imagined MinJ wearing. I shook the thought away. Stop it, Cynthia. You're projecting. That night, I was exhausted and frustrated. Jae-Min had sent my report back 3 times for formatting errors that weren't even errors. He was just being a bully. I got home, poured a glass of wine, and messaged MinJ. My boss is officially a monster. I want to scream. I spent 4 hours on a report just for him to tell me the font was too aggressive. Who says that? MinJ replied almost immediately. Maybe he just wanted an excuse to keep you working late. Maybe he likes knowing you're there. Ugh, you're defending him? I thought you were on my side, I teased. I'm in a bad mood, MinJ. I need a distraction. What kind of distraction? I looked at my reflection in the mirror. I looked tired, but under the wine's influence, I felt a spark of that Cece energy. I went into my bedroom and pulled out a new red bikini I'd bought but never wore. I put it on, let my hair down, and took a deep breath. I told you I'd make you lose control, remember? I texted him. I think it's time for a video call. I want to see if you're as brave as your texts. My heart was thudding against my ribs. This was the moment. The reveal. I didn't care if he was ugly. I didn't care if he was a stranger. I just wanted to see the man who had been occupying my thoughts. Are you sure, Cece? He asked. Once you see me, things change. There's no going back to just words. I'm sure, I said, my finger trembling over the camera icon. Call me. The phone began to buzz in my hand. My breath hitched. This was it. Before we go any further into the moment that ruined my life and changed it forever, make sure you hit that subscribe button, like this video, and drop a comment below. You do not want to miss what happens next. I swiped the green button. The screen flickered, grainy for a second, and then the image sharpened. I was leaning back, trying to look effortless in my red bikini, a smirk on my lips. But the smirk died the second I saw the background. It wasn't a bedroom. It wasn't a living room. It was an office. A very familiar office. The mahogany walls, the heavy glass desk, the J paperweight. And then, the camera tilted up. Kang Jae-Min was sitting there, his silk tie loosened, his sleeves rolled up. He looked tired, but his eyes, they were wide. Shocked. He was staring at the screen, and I realized he was staring at me. Not Cynthia Moore. He was staring at Cece. Cynthia, he whispered. His voice was thick, a mix of disbelief and something that sounded dangerously like hunger. I couldn't breathe. I couldn't move. My phone felt like it was made of fire. I had been talking about riding him, taming him, and making him lose control to my boss. I didn't say a word. I didn't even give him a chance to speak again. I slammed my finger on the end call button. My hands were shaking so hard, I dropped the phone on the carpet. Oh my God, I gasped, clutching my chest. Oh my God. Oh my God. I scrambled to the app, my pulse racing. Delete. Block. Delete account. I wiped everything. I threw my phone across the room like it was a live grenade. I stayed on the floor for a long time, the silence of my apartment feeling like a physical weight. I had just shown my billionaire boss my body, my secrets, and my unfiltered mouth. I told myself he wouldn't recognize me. I was wearing makeup in the photo. My hair was different. I was in a bikini. But the way he said my name, he knew. I didn't sleep a wink. I showed up to work the next morning looking like a zombie, praying for a miracle. Maybe he'd have a sudden bout of amnesia? Maybe he'd fire me via email so I wouldn't have to see him? But then he walked past. He stopped. And he whispered those words. Running away already? He didn't wait for an answer. He just kept walking, leaving me shivering in his wake. I spent the next 2 hours in a trance. I kept waiting for HR to call. I kept waiting for the security guards to escort me out. But instead, my desk phone buzzed. Cynthia Moore, I answered, my voice cracking. My office. Now, his voice said. Cold. Professional. But there was a vibration in it that made my skin prickle. I stood up, smoothed my skirt, and felt like I was walking toward my own execution. When I reached the top floor, his secretary didn't even look up. He's waiting. I pushed open the heavy doors. Jae-Min was standing by the window, his back to me. The morning sun hit his shoulders, making him look even more like a titan. Close the door, Cynthia, he said, not turning around. I did. The click of the lock sounded like a final judgment. I can explain, Mr. Kang, I started, my voice small. I didn't know it was you. I would never have. You would never have what? He turned then. His expression was unreadable, but his eyes were locked on mine. He started walking toward me, slow and deliberate. You would never have told me you wanted to see me unravel? Or was it the part about how you'd make me forget my own name that you regret? I felt the heat climb up my neck. I was just playing a character. He stopped just inches from me. He was so tall I had to crane my neck to look at him. He reached out, his hand hovering near my face, before he tucked a loose strand of hair behind my ear. His touch was electric, sending a jolt straight to my core. It didn't look like a character to me, he whispered, his voice dropping an octave. It looked like the woman I've been looking for in this building for 6 months, hiding behind a pair of glasses and a shy smile. He leaned in closer, his breath warm against my cheek. Tell me, Cece, are you still planning on making me lose control? Because I've been thinking about nothing else since you hung up on me. The silence in his office was heavy, thick with a tension that felt like it was humming in the floorboards beneath my feet. I couldn't move. My heart was a trapped bird fluttering against my ribs, and I was certain he could hear it. Jae-Min's eyes weren't cold anymore. They were dark, swirling with a mix of curiosity and a predatory kind of patience that made my knees feel like water. I should go, I whispered, though my feet stayed glued to the carpet. I'll have my resignation on your desk by lunch. I'm so sorry, Mr. Kang. This was a professional lapse in resignation. He cut me off, his voice dropping into a low, dangerous register. He stepped even closer, effectively pinning me against the heavy oak door I had just closed. He didn't touch me, but his presence was everywhere. Who said anything about you leaving? You made some very bold promises last night, Cynthia. Or should I call you Cece? You told me that MinJ sounded like he needed a woman who wasn't afraid to break his rules. Was that a lie? I swallowed hard, the memory of my own texts flashing before my eyes like a neon sign of my own stupidity. I want to see you come undone, I had written. I want to be the reason you can't think straight. My face burned so hot I thought I might actually combust. I didn't know it was you. If I had known my CEO was the one on the other side of that app, I would have deleted it instantly. Why? He tilted his head, his gaze dropping to my lips for a split second before snapping back to my eyes. Because you're afraid of the man I am in this office? Or because you're afraid that the monster you described might actually like what he saw? I felt a surge of defensive energy. The Cece in me, the one who didn't take crap from anyone, flickered to life. I looked him dead in the eye, my chin tilting up. Both. You're a monster in this office. You're cold, you're dismissive, and you treat your employees like they're part of the plumbing. And yeah, I'm terrified because I spent 3 weeks telling my deepest secrets to the one person who has the power to destroy my career. Jae-Min didn't flinch. In fact, a ghost of a smirk played on his lips, the first time I had ever seen anything resembling a smile on his face in person. Destroy your career? Cynthia, I've spent the last 3 weeks looking forward to your messages more than my billion-dollar mergers. You're the only person in this city who speaks to me like a human being and not a paycheck or a stepping stone. Even if you did call me a dry sponge. I groaned, covering my face with my hands. Oh God. I forgot I said that. And an aggressive font enthusiast, he added, his voice sounding suspiciously like he was stifling a laugh. I checked that report, by the way. The font was fine. I wanted to see how you'd react. I've noticed you for months, Cynthia. But you always looked so terrified every time I walked by. I didn't think there was a fire like that hiding underneath those corporate blazers. He reached out then, his fingers grazing the sleeve of my gray jacket. The contrast was staggering, the professional, muted fabric of my work life against the memory of the vivid red bikini from the night before. I felt exposed, even though I was fully dressed. "The app is deleted," I said firmly, trying to regain some sense of dignity. "MinJ is gone. Cece is gone. From now on, I am just your junior assistant. Let's just pretend last night never happened. Please." Jae-Min leaned down, his face so close to mine that I could see the golden flecks in his dark irises. "I'm a billionaire, Cynthia. I got here because I never, ever pretend. And I definitely don't let go of things that belong to me." "I don't belong to you," I snapped, my breath hitching as he leaned even closer. "Not yet," he whispered. "But you're not a junior assistant anymore. My personal assistant resigned this morning. She couldn't handle the monster's temper, apparently. You, however, you seem to have plenty of opinions on how I should run my life. So, you're promoted. Starting now." My jaw dropped. "You're promoted? That's not how this works. You can't just. I don't want to be your personal assistant. I'll be with you all day. I'll have to see you every hour." "Exactly," he said, straightening up and walking back to his desk with a sudden, professional coolness that made my head spin. He sat down, clicking a pen, the transition so fast it left me breathless. "Your desk is being moved to the outer office as we speak. I have a gala tonight. You'll be attending with me. We need to discuss the guest list and the charity targets. Sit down, Miss Moore." I stood there, blinking. "The gala?" "As your assistant." "As whatever I need you to be," he said, his eyes flicking up to mine with a spark of that MinJ playfulness. "And Cynthia? Don't wear glasses tonight. I want to see the eyes that looked at me through that camera." I walked out of that office feeling like I had stepped into an alternate dimension. My coworkers were already whispering as movers shifted my boxes from my cubicle to the executive suite. I felt their eyes on me, judging, curious, envious. They thought I had climbed the ladder through some secret merit. They had no idea I had climbed it through a dating app and a very unlucky FaceTime call. Settling into the new desk was a nightmare. Every time Jae-Min buzzed the intercom, my heart skipped. Every time he walked out to head to a meeting, he lingered just a second too long by my chair, his shadow falling over me like a promise. By 4 p.m., I was a nervous wreck. He called me into his office again. This time, there was a large, black box sitting on the sofa. "What's this?" I asked, keeping my voice professional. "A dress for tonight," he said, not looking up from his laptop. "The theme is midnight in Seoul. It's black tie. I expect you to be ready by 7. My driver will pick you up." "Mr. Kang, I really don't think." "It's Jae-Min," he interrupted, finally looking up. "When we're alone, it's Jae-Min. Or Jay, isn't that what you called me in the chat? Right before you told me you liked the way my jawline looked in the moonlight." I felt the heat rush to my face again. I had been so bold, so reckless. That was before I knew you were the man who signs my paychecks. "The paychecks haven't changed the jawline, Cynthia," he said softly, rising from his chair. He walked over to the box and flipped the lid open. Inside was a shimmering, floor-length gown in a deep, midnight blue, almost the exact same shade as the bikini I had worn in my profile picture. He looked at the dress, then at me. "I want to see if this blue looks as good on you as the other one did. Consider it a business requirement." "You're a tyrant," I whispered, though there was no real bite to it. "And you're a temptress who didn't know who she was tempting," he countered. 7 o'clock, Cynthia. Don't be late. I hate waiting, and you've already kept me waiting for 3 weeks." I took the box and practically ran out of the office. My mind was racing. Was this a date? A punishment? Or some twisted game of cat and mouse? As I got into the elevator, I caught my reflection. I looked like a regular office worker, but underneath, I felt a simmering heat I couldn't ignore. The Cece side of me was screaming that I should lean into it. If he wanted to play, I could play. He thought he was the one in control, but he was the one who had been hunting for me on that app. He was the one who couldn't stop thinking about the girl who challenged him. I got home and spent 2 hours getting ready. I did my hair in soft, elegant waves that framed my face. I did my makeup to emphasize my eyes, smoky, dark, and inviting. When I stepped into the dress, it fit like a second skin. It was silk, hugging every curve I had, with a slit that went up to mid-thigh. I looked in the mirror and didn't see the shy assistant. I saw the woman who had made the Coldest Bachelor lose his mind. When the black sedan pulled up to my apartment, my heart was hammering. The driver opened the door, and there he was, sitting in the back, looking devastating in a custom tuxedo. He looked like royalty. He looked like the man who owned half of the city. As I sat down, the scent of him filled the small space. He didn't say anything for a long moment. He just looked at me, his gaze traveling from my heels up to my eyes. "You look," he started, his voice thick. He cleared his throat, regaining his composure. "The blue is acceptable." "Just acceptable?" I teased, feeling a bit of that Cece confidence returning. I thought it was a business requirement to look better than the other blue. Jae-Min leaned in, his shoulder brushing mine. The touch sent a literal spark through my arm. "It's dangerous, Cynthia. You're dangerous. If we weren't going to a public event with 300 photographers, I might actually show you what happens when I lose control." "Is that a threat, Mr. Kang?" "No," he whispered, his lips inches from my ear. "It's a promise. Now let's go. We have a long night ahead of us, and I want everyone to see exactly who is standing by my side." The gala was a blur of flashing lights and polite smiles, but I could feel his hand on the small of my back the entire time. He introduced me as his new right hand, but the way he looked at me told a different story. Every billionaire in the room was looking at me, wondering where I had come from. But then, during a slow song, he leaned in. "I have a confession," he murmured. "What's that?" "I didn't match with you by accident, Cynthia. I saw your IP address on the app's backend. I knew it was someone in my building. I just didn't know it was you until that call." I pulled back, shocked. You tracked me?" "I wanted to know who the firebrand was," he admitted, his eyes dark with a mix of guilt and desire. "And now that I know, I'm never letting you go back to the basement." I was about to respond, to tell him how creepy and yet strangely thrilling that was, when his phone buzzed. He looked at it, his face turning stone cold. "What is it?" I asked. "My father," he said, his grip on my hand tightening. "He's here. And he's brought the woman he wants me to marry. Stay close to me, Cynthia. This is about to get complicated." The air in the ballroom suddenly felt thin, the scent of expensive lilies and heavy perfumes becoming suffocating. Jae-Min's hand, which had been resting warmly on the small of my back, tightened until I could feel the individual pressure of his fingers through the silk of my dress. He wasn't the playful MinJ from the dating app anymore. He was the fortress, the Coldest Bachelor, shielding himself against a storm I couldn't see yet. I looked toward the grand entrance. A man who looked like an older, harsher version of Jae-Min was walking toward us. Beside him was a woman who looked like she had stepped out of a high-fashion magazine, pale, poised, and draped in diamonds that probably cost more than my entire apartment building. "Jae-Min," the older man said, his voice booming with a forced heartiness that didn't reach his cold eyes. "I see you've finally decided to join us. And who is this delightful addition?" His gaze raked over me, and for the first time in my life, I felt the sting of elitism. He didn't see a marketing genius or a hardworking employee. He saw a girl who didn't belong in his tax bracket. "This is Cynthia Moore, my executive assistant," Jae-Min said, his voice as sharp as a razor. He didn't flinch. "Cynthia, this is my father, Chairman Kang. And I assume you remember Mina? We haven't spoken since she moved to London to avoid the scandal her family caused." The woman, Mina, flinched, her perfect smile faltering for a fraction of a second. "Always so charming, Jae-Min. It's lovely to meet you, Cynthia. An assistant. How industrious." I felt my face heat up, But before I could let my Cece side snap back with a witty remark, Jae-Min leaned in closer to me, his shoulder brushing mine in a gesture that felt incredibly protective. She's much more industrious than Mina. She's indispensable, Jae-Min said smoothly. Then, he looked at his father. If you'll excuse us, we have guests to attend to. Business doesn't stop just because you've decided to play matchmaker again. He led me away before they could respond, his stride long and purposeful. We didn't stop until we reached a secluded balcony overlooking the city lights of Seoul. The cool night air hit my face, and I let out a breath I didn't know I was holding. I'm sorry, he muttered, letting go of my waist. He walked to the stone railing, gripping it so hard his knuckles turned white. My father thinks he can control every aspect of my life, including who I spend my time with. I walked up beside him, the midnight blue silk of my dress fluttering in the breeze. Is that why you were on the app, Jae-Min? To find someone he couldn't control? To find someone who didn't know who you were? He turned to look at me, the moonlight catching the sharp angles of his face. In the beginning, maybe. I was tired of women who only saw the Kang name. I wanted someone who would call me out on my crap. Someone who would tell me I have the personality of a dry sponge. I winced. I'm really never going to live that down, am I? Never, he said, and for the first time that night, a real, genuine smile broke across his face. It transformed him. He looked younger, happier, and dangerously handsome. But then it became about you, Cynthia. The way you talked about your dreams, the way you defended your work, and the way you looked in that blue bikini. I couldn't stop thinking about you. I spent my board meetings wondering what you were doing 10 floors below me. You could have just come down and talked to me, I whispered. And say what? Hello, I'm the boss you hate. Would you like to go to dinner? He laughed, a low, melodic sound. I was a coward. I liked the MinJ version of myself because he was allowed to like you. Jae-Min. Jae-Min has to be a machine. I reached out, my hand hesitating before I placed it over his on the railing. His skin was warm, and a shiver that had nothing to do with the cold raced up my arm. You're not a machine. Machines don't get jealous of their father's houseguests. He turned his hand over, interlacing his fingers with mine. The intimacy of the gesture felt more intense than a kiss. I'm not just jealous, Cynthia. I'm territorial. When I saw the way my father looked at you, I wanted to burn this whole building down just to get you away from him. Jae-Min. I know, he sighed, leaning closer until our foreheads were almost touching. I'm moving too fast. You're my employee. This is a HR nightmare. But every time I look at you, I remember that video call. I remember the way you looked at me before you realized who I was. There was desire in your eyes, Cece. Don't try to deny it. I couldn't deny it. My body was humming, leaning into him instinctively. I don't deny it. But this is messy. What happens tomorrow? What happens when we go back to the office and you're the coldest bachelor again? Then we make our own rules, he whispered. His gaze dropped to my lips, and the air between us practically crackled with electricity. I don't care about the chairman. I don't care about Mina. I care about the girl who told me she'd make me lose control. Are you still up for the challenge? I felt a spark of that bold, Cece energy. I reached up, my fingers grazing the silk of his tie, tugging it just enough to bring him an inch closer. I think I've already started, haven't I? You're out here on a balcony instead of inside networking. That seems like a loss of control to me. He groaned, a low sound in the back of his throat. You have no idea. He started to lean in, his eyes fluttering shut, and I held my breath, waiting for the moment our worlds would finally collide. But just as his lips were about to touch mine, the heavy glass doors to the balcony swung open. Jae-Min. There you are. Mina's voice shrilled through the romantic silence like a siren. Your father is calling for the toast. You can't hide out here with the staff all night. Jae-Min stiffened, pulling back instantly. The mask of the CEO slammed back into place so fast it made my head spin. He let go of my hand, smoothing his tuxedo jacket. I'll be there in a moment, Mina, he said, his voice cold enough to freeze the ocean. She lingered, her eyes darting between us with a knowing, nasty smirk. Hurry along. We wouldn't want people to start talking, would we? It would be such a shame for a junior to lose her reputation over a little misunderstanding. She spun on her heel and left. I felt like I had been slapped. The reality of the situation crashed down on me. To them, I was a scandal waiting to happen. To them, I was a distraction. Cynthia, Jae-Min started, reaching for me again. No, I said, stepping back. She's right. Not about the reputation, but about the toast. You have a role to play, and so do I. I'm your assistant, remember? I'll go find the car and wait for you there. Cynthia, wait. Go, Jae-Min, I said, my heart aching. Go be a billionaire. I need a minute to remember who I am. I watched him go, his silhouette tall and lonely as he stepped back into the light of the ballroom. I stayed on the balcony for a long time, watching the traffic below. I felt like I was caught between two lives. I was Cynthia, the girl who needed this job to pay her bills and build a future. And I was Cece, the girl who had fallen for a man she was never supposed to meet. The ride back to my apartment was silent. Jae-Min sat on his side of the car, staring out the window, his jaw tight. He looked like he was at war with himself. When the car finally pulled up to my curb, I reached for the door handle, but he caught my wrist. Don't go yet, he said. The MinJ was back in his voice, vulnerable and searching. It's late, Jae-Min. I know. But I don't want the night to end like this. Not with her words in your head. He reached into his pocket and pulled out a small, velvet bag. I was going to give this to you inside, but the timing was wrong. I opened the bag. Inside was a delicate gold anklet with a tiny, sapphire charm, the exact color of my bikini and my dress. Jae-Min, I can't accept this. It's a business expense, he said, though his eyes were twinkling. A reminder of who's really in charge when the office lights go out. I looked at the sapphire, shimmering in the dim light of the car. You're impossible. I'm a man who knows what he wants, he whispered, leaning across the seat. He didn't kiss me, not yet. He just pressed a soft, lingering kiss to my forehead. I'll see you at 8 a.m., Miss Moore. And don't be late. I have a feeling it's going to be a very busy day. I went upstairs, my heart racing and the gold anklet heavy in my hand. I thought about his father, about Mina, and about the Coldest Bachelor, who had a sapphire hidden in his pocket. The next morning, the office was buzzing. As soon as I stepped off the elevator, Sarah cornered me. What happened last night? She hissed, dragging me toward the break room. The gossip blogs are losing their minds. There's a photo of you and CEO Kang on a balcony. People are saying you're the reason he turned down the chairman's toast. My stomach dropped. What? No, that's not. Cynthia, listen to me, Sarah said, her voice dropping to a whisper. The chairman is in the building. He's in Jae-Min's office right now. And he doesn't look happy. Whatever game you're playing, you need to end it before you get burned. I pushed past her, my heart in my throat. I had to see him. I had to know if he was okay. But when I reached the executive floor, the doors to Jae-Min's office were shut tight. I could hear muffled shouting from inside, deep, angry voices. Suddenly, the door flew open. Chairman Kang stormed out, his face purple with rage. He stopped when he saw me, his eyes narrowing into slits. You, he spat. I hope you enjoyed your little dress-up party. Because it's the last one you'll ever attend in this city. If my son won't listen to reason, I'll make sure the reason is removed. He didn't wait for a response. He marched toward the elevators, his security team following like a funeral procession. I stood there, frozen, until I heard a soft sound from inside the office. I walked in. Jae-Min was sitting at his desk, his head in his hands. He looked defeated. Jae-Min, I whispered. He looked up, and my heart broke. He looked like he hadn't slept in years. He's cutting me off, Cynthia. Not just the inheritance. He's going to the board to have me removed as CEO. He says I'm unstable because I won't marry Mina. I walked over to him, standing behind his chair and placing my hands on his shoulders. He leaned back into me, a long, shaky sigh escaping his lips. Is it worth it? I asked softly. Losing everything for this? He reached up, grabbing my hand and bringing it to his lips. He kissed my palm, his eyes never leaving mine. Cynthia, I spent my whole life building a kingdom I didn't even want. If losing it means I get to keep the only thing that actually makes me feel alive, then it's the best bargain I've ever made. But the chairman wasn't done. Within an hour, my computer screen flickered. An internal memo had been sent to the entire company. Subject: Termination of employment, Cynthia Moore. I stared at the screen, the words blurring. He wasn't just firing me. He was blacklisting me. The memo cited unprofessional conduct and violation of corporate ethics. Jae-Min saw it at the same time I did. He slammed his fist onto his desk, the sound echoing through the room. He can't do this. I am the CEO. He's the chairman, Jae-Min, I said, a strange calmness washing over me. He can do whatever he wants. Not this, Jae-Min growled, standing up. He thinks he can take away my power? He forgot who built this company. He forgot that I have his secrets too. He turned to me, his eyes burning with a fire I had never seen before, not even in our late-night chats. Cynthia, do you trust me? With my life, I said, and I realized I meant it. Then get your things. We're leaving. But we're not going quietly. He grabbed his coat and my hand, and we walked out of that office together. Every eye in the building was on us. The whispers were deafening. But as we stepped into the elevator, Jae-Min didn't look at the floors. He looked at me. The chairman thinks he can win by playing dirty, he whispered as the door slid shut. But he's about to find out what happens when you push a monster too far. The elevator descended in a heavy, pressurized silence. Every floor we passed felt like another piece of my old life falling away. I looked at our joined hands, his pale, strong fingers gripping mine with a desperate kind of strength. I was a junior assistant who had just been publicly shamed in a company-wide memo, and he was a billionaire on the verge of a coup. By the time we hit the lobby, the news had already spread. Security guards who used to bow to Jae-Min now stood stiffly, eyes averted. The receptionist, who usually tripped over her words to greet him, was suddenly very busy with a stack of papers. It was like we had become ghosts in his own kingdom. Don't look at them, Jae-Min muttered, his jaw so tight I thought it might crack. Look at me. We walked out of the revolving doors into the crisp Seoul air. His sleek black sedan was waiting, but as we approached, the driver, a man who had served Jae-Min for years, stepped out with a somber face. I'm sorry, Mr. Kang, the driver whispered, looking at the pavement. The chairman. He revoked the lease on the vehicles. And your personal accounts have been flagged for internal audit by the board. I felt a cold shiver. The chairman wasn't just firing us, he was stripping Jae-Min of his identity. No car, no accounts, no title. Jae-Min didn't shout. He didn't plead. He just nodded once, reached into his pocket, and pulled out his wallet. He handed a stack of cash to the driver. Take care of your family, Choi. This isn't your fight. He turned to me, his eyes burning with a dark, defiant energy. Change of plans. We're taking a taxi. Jae-Min, where are we going? I asked as he hailed a bright orange cab. Your penthouse is probably crawling with his people by now. We aren't going to the penthouse, he said, ushering me into the back of the taxi. He gave the driver an address in a district I didn't recognize, a place far away from the glass skyscrapers of Gangnam. We're going to the one place he forgot I owned. My grandfather's old studio in Mapo. The ride was long and tense. I kept checking my phone, watching the social media storm. #Kang scandal was trending. Photos from the gala were everywhere, but now they were being picked apart. People were calling me a gold digger, an opportunist. I felt a lump in my throat, the weight of the world's judgment pressing down on me. Jae-Min noticed. He took my phone out of my hand and slid it into his pocket. Stop reading the lies, Cynthia. They don't know who you are. They don't know that you're the only person who stayed when the money stopped. But your reputation. I whispered. You worked so hard to be the best, to be the coldest bachelor everyone feared. Now they're laughing. Let them laugh, he said, leaning his head back against the seat and closing his eyes. I spent 10 years being a statue for that man. I'm tired, Cece. I just want to be Jay for a while. The taxi pulled up to a modest, slightly weathered brick building in a quiet alley. It was a stark contrast to the marble palace of Kang Global. Jae-Min led me up a narrow flight of stairs to a heavy steel door. When he opened it, my breath caught. It was a massive, open-plan loft filled with old canvases, drafting tables, and books. It smelled like cedarwood and oil paint. Large windows looked out over the Han River, the city lights beginning to twinkle like fallen stars. This was where I hid when I was a teenager, Jae-Min said, tossing his blazer onto a worn leather sofa. Before my father decided I was a business asset instead of a son. He doesn't even remember this place exists. I walked to the center of the room, feeling the sudden shift in atmosphere. There were no cameras here. No HR memos. No chairman. Just us. Jae-Min, I said, turning to face him. He looked so out of place in his $5,000 tuxedo in this dusty, soulful room. What's the plan? You said you have his secrets. He walked over to an old wooden desk and pulled out a battered laptop. My father is a perfectionist, but he's also arrogant. He thinks he's untouchable. For years, he's been funneling charity funds into offshore accounts to pay off the families of the women he's, well, discarded over the years, including Mina's family after their scandal. I have a ledger. I've had it for months. Why didn't you use it before? Because he's my father, Jae-Min said softly, his voice cracking. I kept hoping he'd see me as a person eventually. I kept hoping I wouldn't have to destroy him to be free. But when he touched you, when he tried to ruin your life just to spite me, that was the end. He sat down at the desk, the blue light of the laptop illuminating the sharp lines of his face. He looked like the ruthless billionaire again, but this time, the ruthlessness was directed at the person who deserved it. I need you, Cynthia, he said, looking up at me. I need Cece. I need the girl who knows how to navigate the digital world, the one who knows how to make things go viral. We aren't going to the board. We're going to the public. I felt a rush of adrenaline. This was my territory. You want me to leak it? Not just leak it, he said, a slow, dangerous smirk spreading across his face. I want you to package it. Make it a story. Show the world the Coldest Bachelor isn't the one they should be worried about. Show them the chairman. We worked through the night. The transition from lovers to partners in crime was seamless. I sat cross-legged on the floor with his laptop, sorting through the files he had decrypted. It was a digital treasure trove of corruption. Every time I found a new document, Jae-Min would lean over my shoulder, his warmth a constant anchor in the middle of the chaos. You're brilliant, he whispered at one point, his lips grazing my temple as I edited a video montage of the evidence. I'm just an aggressive font enthusiast, remember? I teased, though my heart was racing from his closeness. By 4 a.m., the campaign was ready. We had a series of timed posts, leaked documents, and a personal video statement from Jae-Min that we had filmed against the backdrop of the darkened river. In the video, he wasn't the CEO. He was a man telling the truth. Are you ready to press the button? I asked, my finger hovering over the upload key. Once we do this, there's no turning back. You'll be the man who brought down the Kang Empire. Jae-Min walked over to me and knelt on the floor, taking my hand in his. He looked at me with an intensity that made everything else disappear. I don't care about the empire, Cynthia. I just want the girl. You have the girl, I whispered. Then press it. I clicked. The next few hours were a whirlwind. The internet exploded. The Kang whistleblower became the biggest story in Asia within an hour. The ledger was being shared by every major news outlet. By sunrise, the police were at the gates of the chairman's estate, and the board of directors was calling an emergency meeting to distance themselves from him. Jae-Min and I watched it all from the quiet of the studio. We were exhausted, our eyes stinging, but for the first time in my life, I felt truly powerful. We did it, I said, leaning my head on his shoulder. We did, he replied, wrapping his arm around me. But the chairman isn't a man who goes down without a fight. He still has one card left to play. What's that? Jae-Min looked at me, a shadow of worry crossing his face. The unprofessional conduct memo he sent. He's going to try to prove that I coerced you. He's going to try to make it look like I used my power to force you into a relationship. If he can prove that, the board will have legal grounds to invalidate everything I just did. I stood up, pacing the room. But we have the chats. We have evidence that we met on the app. The app where I used a fake name? Jae-Min pointed out. In the eyes of the law, a CEO matching with a junior employee on a dating app looks like predatory behavior, Cynthia. No matter how much we love each other. The weight of it hit me. He was right. Our beautiful, accidental romance could be twisted into something ugly and illegal. So, what do? Jae-Min stood up and walked toward me, taking both of my hands in his. There's only one way to prove it wasn't coercion. There's only one way to show the world that this is real. What? He took a deep breath, his eyes searching mine. We have to go to the board meeting together. And I have to tell them the truth about Cece and MinJ. All of it. The bikini photo, the spicy texts, the dry sponge comments. Everything. We have to show them that we fell in love as equals before we ever met as boss and employee. Jae-Min, that's so embarrassing, I whispered, thinking about a room full of 60-year-old men reading my private messages. I know, he said, his thumb tracing the back of my hand. But it's the only way to save us. Are you brave enough to be Cece one more time in front of the whole world? I looked at the sapphire anklet on my leg, then up at the man who had risked everything for me. I'm brave enough, I said. As long as you're standing right next to me. Always, he promised. The morning sun crawled over the Han River, casting long, golden fingers across the hardwood floor of the studio. It was a beautiful sight, but all I could feel was the cold knot of anxiety tightening in my stomach. Today was the day. The day we stepped out of the shadows and into the firing line of the most powerful board of directors in the country. You're overthinking it again, Jae-Min said, his voice husky from lack of sleep. He was leaning against the kitchen counter, holding 2 mugs of black coffee. He had swapped his tuxedo for a simple black turtleneck and slacks, but he still looked every bit the commander. I'm not overthinking, I argued, taking a mug from him. I'm mentally preparing for 50 elderly men in suits to read the part where I told MinJ that his text messages made my toes curl. Jae-Min, I might actually die of embarrassment. He stepped closer, his hand finding the small of my back, pulling me into his heat. If you die, I'll have to follow you, because I'm the one who told you I wanted to see you in nothing but that red bikini and a smile. We're in this together, Cece. Every cringy, spicy, beautiful word of it. I leaned my head against his chest, listening to the steady thrum of his heart. It was the only thing that felt real in a world that had turned into a tabloid headline overnight. What if they don't believe us? What if they still see it as a CEO taking advantage of a junior? Then we walk out of that room, leave this city, and start over somewhere where nobody knows the name Kang, he said firmly. He tilted my chin up, his eyes searching mine. But I have a feeling that once they see the fire in your eyes when you defend our story, they won't have a choice but to believe it. We spent the next hour preparing the evidence. It felt strange, almost sacrilegious, to download our private history onto a silver flash drive. Every message felt like a heartbeat. The jokes about his robotic nature, the way he described the lonely view from the top floor, and the way I'd tell him about my favorite street food spots in Brooklyn. It was a digital map of 2 souls finding each other in a desert of corporate greed. Ready? Jae-Min asked, standing by the door. Ready, I whispered, clutching my purse. The drive to the Kang Global headquarters was surreal. There were news vans parked 3 deep at the entrance. Protesters held signs, some supporting the whistleblower CEO, others calling for the chairman's arrest. As we stepped out of the taxi, the wall of camera flashes was blinding. Jae-Min didn't hesitate. He reached back, his fingers interlacing with mine, and led me through the crowd. He didn't hide his face. He didn't look down. He walked with the grace of a man who had already lost everything and realized he was finally free. The boardroom was on the 50th floor, the throne room of the empire. As the doors opened, the silence was deafening. 30 men sat around a massive glass table, their faces grim. At the head of the table sat the vice chairman, an old ally of Jae-Min's father. "Mr. Kang," the vice chairman said, his voice dripping with disapproval. "And Miss Moore. We didn't expect you to show up together. It doesn't exactly help your case against the allegations of inappropriate influence." Jae-Min pulled out a chair for me before sitting down himself. He looked at the room, his gaze steady and unafraid. "I'm not here to argue about influence, Vice Chairman. I'm here to provide the context my father conveniently left out of his memo." He slid the flash drive across the glass table. "On this drive is the complete, unedited chat history between two individuals named MinJ and Cece. It began 3 weeks before I ever knew Cynthia Moore worked for this company. It details a relationship built on anonymity, mutual respect, and, eventually, a level of honesty that I have never found within these walls." A murmur went through the room. One of the younger board members reached for the drive and plugged it into the central system. The massive screens on the wall flickered to life. I looked at the floor, my face burning as the first few messages popped up. "MinJ, you look like trouble, Cece. Cece, you have no idea. And what about you, MinJ? You're hiding." As you can see, Jae-Min continued, his voice echoing in the large room. Neither of us knew who the other was. I was a man looking for an escape from a life I hated, and she was a woman who saw through the mask I wore every day. We didn't meet as CEO and assistant. We met as two people who were tired of being lonely. The board members began scrolling through the logs. Some looked uncomfortable, others intrigued. Then, the messages grew more personal. My heart hammered as a screenshot of my aggressive font complaint appeared. "Wait," one board member said, pointing at the screen. "Is that a complaint about the CEO's management style?" "Yes," I said, standing up. My voice was shaky at first, but it grew stronger as I looked at the men who held our future in their hands. I told him he was a robotic jerk. I told him he had the personality of a dry sponge. Does that sound like a woman who is being coerced or influenced by her boss's power? Or does it sound like a woman who didn't have a clue who she was talking to? A few of the board members chuckled. The tension in the room began to shift. And when we finally did the video call, Jae-Min added, his voice softening, "It wasn't a moment of triumph for me. It was a moment of terror for both of us. We realized the world had played a joke on us. But instead of running, we chose to see it through." The vice chairman cleared his throat, looking at the screen where a particularly flirty exchange about a red bikini was frozen. "It's unconventional, Mr. Kang. But the timeline doesn't lie. These messages are dated well before her promotion. The promotion was based on her competence, which she proved to me during our chats," Jae-Min said firmly. "But the relationship? That was based on the fact that she's the only person in this city who isn't afraid of me." Suddenly, the doors to the boardroom burst open. Chairman Kang marched in, flanked by 3 lawyers. He looked disheveled, his eyes bloodshot. "This is a farce. You are entertaining the delusions of a disgraced boy and his plaything." Jae-Min stood up, his height dwarfing his father's as they faced off. "The only farce here, father, is the charity account you used to hide your payoffs. The police are already reviewing the documents I leaked. You're not here to stop a board meeting. You're here to say goodbye to your company." "I built this," the chairman screamed, his voice cracking. "And I saved it," Jae-Min countered quietly. "From you." The vice chairman stood up, looking at the chairman with cold eyes. "The board has seen enough. The timeline of the relationship is clear, and the evidence of financial misconduct is undeniable. Chairman Kang, you are hereby suspended from all duties pending the police investigation. Security will escort you out." The room erupted into chaos as the chairman was led away, shouting threats that no one was listening to anymore. Jae-Min didn't watch him go. He turned to me, his shoulders finally dropping as the weight of the war lifted. "It's over," he whispered. "Is it?" I asked, looking at the board members who were now whispering among themselves. The vice chairman walked over to us, holding out a hand. "Mr. Kang, the board would like to discuss your reinstatement. And Miss Moore, it seems your marketing instincts are quite sharp. We'd like to discuss a permanent position for you in the executive PR department. Clearly, you know how to handle a crisis." Jae-Min looked at me, a question in his eyes. He was offering me the choice. Did I want to stay in this world? Or did I want to walk away with him? I looked at the sapphire anklet on my leg, then at the man who had fought a war for me. "I think I'd like that," I said, smiling. "But I have one condition." "What's that?" the vice chairman asked. "No more aggressive fonts." Jae-Min laughed, a loud, beautiful sound that filled the room. He leaned down and kissed me right there, in front of the board, the lawyers, and the ghost of his father's empire. It wasn't a fade to black moment. It was the beginning. The kiss in the boardroom wasn't just a kiss, it was a declaration of war against the old guard and a victory lap for the new one. When Jae-Min finally pulled away, his eyes were bright, stripped of that cold, robotic glaze that had defined him for years. The board members cleared their throats and looked at their tablets, suddenly very interested in digital spreadsheets to avoid the raw emotion radiating from their CEO. "Well," the vice chairman muttered, adjusting his silk tie. "We have a lot of damage control to do. The press is camping in the lobby like they're waiting for a rock star. Jae-Min, we need a statement. A real one." Jae-Min didn't let go of my hand. "The statement is simple. My father is out. The corruption ends today. And as for my personal life, it's no longer up for public debate. Cynthia is staying by my side, not because of a contract, but because she's the only one who saw the man behind the bank account." We walked out of that boardroom like we own the sky. But as the gold-plated elevator doors slid shut, the adrenaline began to ebb, replaced by a heavy, bone-deep exhaustion. I leaned my head against the cool metal wall, closing my eyes. "You okay, Cece?" Jae-Min whispered, stepping into my space. He didn't touch me, but I could feel the hum of his energy, that magnetic pull that had started on a dating app and landed us in the middle of a corporate coup. "I'm tired, Jae-Min. I'm so tired of being the assistant, or the scandal. I just want to be me for 5 minutes." He reached out, his thumb tracing the line of my jaw with a tenderness that made my breath hitch. "Then let's go. No more meetings. No more cameras. Just us." We didn't go back to the studio. He took me to a small, hidden rooftop garden atop one of the smaller buildings he owned. It wasn't flashy or high-tech, it was filled with overgrown greenery, weathered wooden benches, and a view of Seoul that felt intimate rather than intimidating. "I bought this place when I first started as CEO," he said, leading me to a bench. "My father wanted me to buy a villa in France. I bought a roof in Mapo. It was my only act of rebellion until I met you." I sat down, the silk of my blue dress rustling. "You've been rebelling a lot lately. It's a good look on me, don't you think?" He sat beside me, throwing his arm over the back of the bench. He looked at me, his gaze dropping to the sapphire anklet shimmering on my leg. "You kept it on. It's a business requirement, remember?" I teased, though my voice was soft. He leaned in, his scent, that woody, expensive mix of cedar and success, filling my senses. "Cynthia, back in the boardroom. When I said I wanted the girl, I meant it. I don't care about the title. If the board had said no, I was ready to walk out that door and never look back." "I know," I whispered. "That's what scares me. You risked a billion-dollar empire for a girl you met on an app." "I didn't risk an empire," he corrected, his voice dropping to that low, gravelly tone that always made my heart skip. "I traded a prison for a home. Your home, Cynthia." He leaned closer, his lips brushing against mine in a ghost of a touch. It wasn't a demand, it was a question. I answered by wrapping my arms around his neck, pulling him into me. The kiss was slow, deep, and tasted like relief. In the quiet of the rooftop, Away from the flashing lights and the angry memos, we weren't a CEO and a junior assistant. We were just Jae and Cece. But as the sun began to set, painting the sky in bruises of purple and orange, a shadow fell over us. Not a physical shadow, but the reality of what came next. "What about Mina?" I asked, pulling back just an inch. "She's not going to just disappear. Her family lost everything because of your leak." Jae-Min's expression hardened for a second. "Mina is a survivor. She'll find another billionaire to cling to. But she's barred from the building, and her family's assets are being frozen as part of the investigation. She can't hurt you anymore." "It's not me I'm worried about," I said, looking at him. "It's you. Your father. He looked like he wanted to kill you." "He's already dead in the ways that matter," Jae-Min said coldly. "He chose power over his son a long time ago. Today, I just returned the favor." He stood up, offering me his hand. "Come on. We have one more stop to make before the day is officially over." "Where?" "You'll see." He took me to a small, hole-in-the-wall Korean barbecue joint in a neighborhood so crowded and loud that no one even looked twice at a man in a designer turtleneck. We sat on plastic stools, the smell of sizzling pork and fermented kimchi filling the air. "You're taking me here?" I laughed, looking at the dented metal table. "After a board meeting?" "This was the place I told you about in the chat," he reminded me, his eyes twinkling. "The one where I said I wanted to take you if we ever met. You told me you'd out-eat me in spicy pork." I felt a lump in my throat. He remembered. Amidst the chaos of the last 48 hours, he remembered the silly, late-night challenge from a girl he didn't even know. "I still will," I said, grabbing the tongs. We ate like we hadn't seen food in years. We laughed, we argued over who was better at grilling the meat, and for 2 hours, the world didn't exist. We were just two people on a date. He told me about his mother, the woman who had loved art and hidden her paintings in the studio we'd stayed in. I told him about my grandmother in Brooklyn, the woman who had taught me that a dress doesn't make a queen, but the way she carries herself does. "She was right," Jae-Min said, watching me across the table. "You carried yourself like a queen today, even when my father was spitting venom." "I had a good king standing next to me," I replied. As we walked out of the restaurant, the night air was cool. He hailed a taxi, no more black sedans for now, and we headed back toward the studio. He had decided to stay there for a while, away from the sterile luxury of his penthouse. As we reached the door to the studio, he stopped, pinning me against the brick wall. The streetlights were dim, casting long shadows across his face. "Cynthia," he whispered, his hands framing my face. "I know this started as a mistake. A dating app mishap. But I want you to know, I would have found you eventually. Even without the app. Even without the bikini. I would have looked for the girl with the aggressive reports until I found her. I'm glad the app did the work for you," I teased, my breath hitching as he leaned in. "Me too," he murmured, his lips finding the sensitive spot just below my ear. "But from now on, no more secrets. No more MinJ or Cece. Just us." He picked me up, my legs instinctively wrapping around his waist, and carried me into the studio. The door clicked shut behind us, locking out the world. In the darkness of the room, illuminated only by the city lights reflecting off the river, everything felt perfect. But the next morning, as I woke up to the smell of coffee and the sound of Jae-Min on the phone, the peace was shattered. "What do you mean, gone?" Jae-Min's voice was sharp, urgent. I sat up, pulling the sheets to my chest. "Jae-Min? What's wrong?" He turned to me, his face pale. "My father. He was being moved to the precinct for questioning last night. The transport vehicle was involved in an accident." My heart stopped. "Is he?" "He's gone, Cynthia. He escaped. And he didn't go alone." Mina was seen at the scene. The fear I had felt in the boardroom was nothing compared to this. A cornered animal is dangerous, but a billionaire with nothing left to lose and a grudge is a nightmare. "He's coming for us, isn't he?" I whispered. Jae-Min walked over to the bed, sitting beside me and taking my hands. His grip was like iron. "He can try. But this time, I'm not playing by his rules. And I'm certainly not letting him get anywhere near you. Before he could say another word, my phone buzzed on the nightstand. It was an unknown number. I looked at Jae-Min, my hand trembling as I answered. Hello. You should have stayed in the basement, Cynthia, a woman's voice purred. It was Mina. Now, the game has really started. Look out the window. I froze. Jae-Min snatched the phone from me, but I was already looking. Down in the alleyway, a silver car was idling. A flash of blonde hair was visible in the driver's seat. And then, the car sped away, leaving a trail of smoke and a terrifying realization. They weren't just running. They were hunting. The silver car vanished into the gray morning mist of Mapo, leaving a silence in the studio so heavy it felt like the walls were closing in. Jae-Min was still holding my phone, his knuckles white, his eyes tracking the empty street where Mina had just been. He didn't look like a billionaire anymore. He looked like a man who was ready to tear the world apart to keep it from touching me. She's baiting us, Jae-Min said, his voice dropping into a low, vibrating growl. He turned to me, pulling me into his chest, his heart hammering against mine. Cynthia, listen to me. They have nothing left. No bank accounts, no board of directors, no reputation. This is desperation. Desperate people are the ones who pull the trigger. Jae-Min, I whispered, my face buried in the crook of his neck. She sounded so calm. So certain. He pulled back, cupping my face in his hands. I'm moving you. Now. I have a safe house in Jeju, or we can get you on a private flight to your grandmother in Brooklyn. You'll be safe there. I looked at him, really looked at him. The man who had faced down an empire for me. The man who had been MinJ in the dark and Jae in the light. No. I'm not running, Jae-Min. Every time we've tried to hide or pretend, it's blown up in our faces. We end this here. Together. He started to argue, his protective instincts flaring, but the look in my eyes stopped him. I wasn't just his assistant. I was the woman who had called him a dry sponge and made him fall in love with the truth. Okay, he breathed, pressing his forehead against mine. Together. But we don't wait for them to come to us. We finish the hunt. He grabbed his laptop, his fingers flying across the keys with a lethal precision. Mina thinks she's clever, but she forgot one thing. I bought that silver car for her 3 years ago. The GPS was never deactivated from my master account. Can you track them? I am tracking them, he said, a cold, predatory smirk spreading across his lips. They're headed toward the Incheon docks. My father isn't trying to kill us, Cynthia. He's trying to leave the country with whatever liquid assets he has left in his private safe at the shipping terminal. We didn't call the police. Not yet. Jae-Min knew that if the authorities showed up, his father would vanish into the labyrinth of shipping containers. We had to trap him ourselves. The drive to Incheon was a blur of high-speed turns and silent prayers. Jae-Min drove a nondescript SUV he'd kept in the studio's garage, his eyes locked on the red pulsing dot on his dashboard. As we reached the docks, the salt air filled the car, cold and biting. The shipping terminal was a forest of rusted metal and towering cranes, the perfect place for a ghost to disappear. Stay in the car, Jae-Min commanded as we pulled up behind a stack of blue containers. Jae-Min. Cynthia, please. Just this once. If anything happens to me, the flash drive is in the glove box. Give it to the vice chairman. Promise me. I grabbed his hand, squeezing it until it hurt. Nothing is going to happen to you. Go. I watched him disappear into the shadows of the containers, his black coat fluttering in the wind. Minutes felt like hours. The only sound was the distant horn of a cargo ship and the rhythmic thumping of my own heart. I couldn't just sit there. I couldn't be the distressed damsel in a story where I had always been the one to take charge. I stepped out of the car, the gravel crunching under my boots. I followed the sound of voices, low, urgent, and angry. It's empty, you old fool. Mina's voice shrieked. The safe is empty. He moved the money. He couldn't have. Chairman Kang's voice was ragged, desperate. I kept the codes. I kept the keys. I changed them yesterday. Jae-Min's voice rang out, calm and terrifyingly steady. I rounded the corner of a massive red container and saw them. Jae-Min was standing 10 feet away from his father and Mina. The chairman looked like a broken man, clutching a briefcase that was clearly empty. Mina was standing beside him, her eyes darting around like a trapped animal's. Jae-Min, the chairman gasped, lunging toward his son. You stole it. That's my life's work. It was the company's money, father. I returned it to the pension fund this morning. You're leaving this country with exactly what you gave me when I was a child. Nothing. Mina saw me then. Her eyes narrowed, and she reached into her designer bag. I saw the glint of metal, not a gun, but a heavy, sharp letter opener, a pathetic weapon of a woman who had lost her mind. She started toward me, her face contorted with rage. This is all your fault, she screamed. You ruined everything. You little. Before we go to the final moment where our lives were decided, before the sirens began to wail in the distance and the empire finally crumbled, make sure you hit that subscribe button, like this video, and drop a comment. Tell me, would you have stayed in the car or would you have fought for the man you loved? Jae-Min moved faster than I'd ever seen him move. He stepped between us, catching Mina's wrist in midair. He didn't strike her. He just held her there, his eyes burning with a cold finality. It's over, Mina, he said softly. The police are at the entrance. There's nowhere left to go. She slumped to the ground, sobbing, the perfect socialite finally shattered into 1,000 jagged pieces. The chairman just stood there, staring at the empty sea, a man who had realized too late that power is a ghost that disappears when the sun comes up. The sirens grew louder, blue and red lights reflecting off the steel containers. The police swarmed the area, led by the detectives Jae-Min had alerted just minutes before we arrived. As they led his father and Mina away in handcuffs, Jae-Min didn't look at them. He turned to me, his chest heaving, his eyes searching mine for any sign of hurt. Are you okay? He whispered, his hands shaking as they touched my shoulders. I am now, I said, leaning into him. Is it really over? The war is over, he said, pulling me into a deep, desperate embrace. Now, we just have the rest of our lives. 2 months later, the headlines had shifted. The Kang scandal had been replaced by the Kang recovery. Jae-Min was officially reinstated as CEO, but the Coldest Bachelor tag had been permanently retired. The media now called him the visionary, a man who had cleaned up his own house to build a better one. I sat in my new office, the executive PR suite, looking out over the city. My desk was organized, my reports were filed, and my fonts were perfectly professional. But underneath my desk, the sapphire anklet was still there, a secret reminder of the night I accidentally FaceTimed a billionaire. The door opened and Jae-Min walked in. He wasn't wearing a suit. He was wearing a simple white shirt, the sleeves rolled up, looking relaxed and happy. Miss Moore, he said, leaning against my doorframe with that familiar, playful smirk. I have a complaint about your latest press release. Oh, really, Mr. Kang? I teased, spinning in my chair. Is it too aggressive? No, he said, walking over and pulling a small, velvet box from his pocket. He sat on the edge of my desk, looking at me with an intensity that still made my toes curl. It didn't mention anything about a wedding. And I think the public is going to want to know when the CEO is officially taking himself off the market. My heart did that familiar, chaotic dance. Is that a business proposal, Jay? No, he whispered, opening the box to reveal a diamond that shone like the Han River at midnight. It's a life proposal. From MinJ to Cece. From me to you. Forever. I didn't need to check my phone. I didn't need a dating app. I just looked at the man who had seen me at my worst and loved me at my boldest. I think I can work that into the schedule, I whispered, pulling him down for a kiss. The mistake that had started it all was the best decision I ever made. We were no longer characters in a drama or profiles on a screen. We were just two people who had found their way home through the chaos. And as the sun set over Seoul, I knew one thing for sure: I was never, ever going to block him again.